Join us on the Path Radio Mix online. And to get there, type in thepathradio.com. That's thepathradio.com. And enjoy free streaming music all day long. That's it. thepathradio.com. All right, now let's get to the main show, the Monthly Social Podcast, with me, your host, Guido Perino, as you go on with Guido. Welcome to 2021. Happy New Year, everybody. This is the first podcast of the new year. Thanks for being with us. I guess we'll call this Season 2, even though Season 1 had only 3 episodes. We started late in the year, but whatever. Hey, we made it to 2021. Got a pretty great podcast set up for today. We're going to be talking with registered nurse. We've got some topics around sensorineural hearing loss, cerebral palsy and parenting, and caring for elderly parents during a pandemic. And then we're going to finish things off today with my story about how I was Jean Beliveau'sBody Bodyguard for a day. So, cool, fun story. Should be a good listen. Hope you enjoy it. Welcome back, and let's get going. My guest this month, I'd like to welcome registered nurse RN Patty Greve. Patty lives and works in Sault Ste. Marie, and she's agreed to share her personal story and insight with us on a few topics that include sudden sensorineural hearing loss, cerebral palsy and parenting, and caring for elderly parents during a pandemic. Lots of loaded subject material there for us to digest for this month. I'm sure along the way that she'll also offer many other insights, as she's been doing with or without my asking for the better part of over 40 years now. You see, in full transparency, Patty is my sister, and I'm sure that perhaps I've got a few stories that I'll try and throw in there too. But I do have to be careful because she does throw a pretty vicious cartwheel.
I love that.
I thought it might trigger some memories there, Patty. So, and in continuing with transparency, we've been reminiscing for a couple of minutes before I hit record here, and just laughing. Our brother's turning 60 years old this year, and we did some sibling videos and music. And I know that folks know that I do a lot of music stuff through United Way at work and other opportunities. So we had some laughs there. So Patty, again, listen, welcome, and thanks for doing this. You do have some great topics today. I think that they'll really help a major part of my podcast agenda, which is to help inform people from month to month on topics like disabilities and inclusion, racialization, and other topics that hopefully in discussion bring people greater understanding and comfort with themselves too, right? So before we get into the questions, I got to tell you, and just for folks who are listening, I'm really impressed over this last year or so. You've taken up gardening to like a completely new level. You've done stuff outside. You've done stuff inside, and growing up, I think I was the one that helped Dad the most in the garden. But what's the thing that you have inside the house? What's it called?
I have a tower garden. It's a hydroponic, aeroponic garden that you can grow all year round, and they're non-rooted vegetables.
It's phenomenal. Like, what are some of the things? Like, I see you're always picking stuff and making stuff. What are some of the things that you're growing in there?
Oh my gosh, you can do pretty much anything that's non-rooted, as I mentioned. So I have Swiss chard and bok choy and pak choy and romaine lettuce and all your herbs, parsley, basil, microgreens, which are super nutrient foods that you can put on anything. You can do tomatoes. I love all the greens because I just love looking at it, and it makes you feel alive, and watching things grow. And I know you mentioned you did more with Dad, and that's probably true because I was a little bit older then. But I did a lot with our grandfather and our Nonno in his garden, and being right in there and picking fresh peas. So it brings me back to that. Because we're in Northern Ontario, you can't garden all year round outside.
Right.
But I just get the best of that world inside, and that kind of morphed into an interest in outdoor gardening again. And, with the pandemic last year in March, we were all at home, so I took that up and did some raised bed gardening, and I just love it. And it's just it's a new vehicle for me, and it's a new joy. It just brings me so much joy, and I reflect, and I just love it. I love it. I could hear it in your voice, and I know that you post online some of the amazing, like, just large and beautiful vegetables that you're growing, and you mentioned the outdoor stuff as well. And you sort of read my mind a little bit when it came to the pandemic. I thought, was part of this pandemic related? Like, you started doing it because of the pandemic. Now, is it something that you think, when this is over, and hopefully that's in sight soon, right, that you'll continue, or do you see yourself changing it up a bit, or what do you think about that? Actually, no, I think I'm going to continue. I think it just kind of helped press that reset button and give you the time that you think you don't have normally in life. And it just gave me that time to focus on something positive and something that is good for you as far as self-care and filling your cup. And I think it's just going to grow from here. And so my next plan is, and I actually have the framework for it, is putting in a greenhouse. And it's going to be kind of that stepping stone for me into retirement.
Wow.
And just enjoying it. So it's opened up a beautiful world that I always wanted to do, but I thought I never had enough time. So,
well, it's been fun to watch and learn. It seems much more intriguing than my bread making that I took up, but and you seem very informed and intuitive in terms of the different varieties, and it's inspiring. I know that I've seen other people get inspired by your gardening, so it fits quite well with the theme of our conversations today, and informing people as well. So thanks for sharing the gardening journey with us, and I'm looking forward to, at some point when I'm able to come see everybody again, enjoying some of it myself. Before we get into the meat of the questions, I typically have 4 or 5 questions for guests here. As we're transitioning into those, one of the questions that I usually ask is for folks to tell us a little bit about their career journey. And I said, in the intro, I said you're a registered nurse. And forgive me, this sounds a lot like I've been accused of saying that the way that I ask these questions sounds a little bit like an interview, because there's multiple parts to it. But the reason I'm doing that is so that I can ask what's on my mind, and then sort of give you the canvas to paint as you will with those questions, and you'll draw out probably what is most important of what you want to say. So as a registered nurse, you're a registered nurse. How did you decide that that's what you wanted to be? The other thing that's on my mind is what was your greatest challenge in achieving that? Do you have any advice for anyone who wants to be one? And especially now, like we're in a pandemic, right? Would you make the same decision knowing what you know and dealing with what frontline workers are dealing with? And of course, anything else that you'd like to share about the journey. So I'm going to let you sort of walk with that for a few minutes. And if I hear something, you might hear me interject. But if you can share that experience with us.
Absolutely. It's great to sort of reflect back on our career choices in our life. And I think it's a great question. And so when I looked at this, I think of way back, and I'm going to go back in 1970. I was 5 years old. I'm aging myself. Our mom was in an accident at our cottage, and it was a huge explosion. And to make a long story short, it was a very traumatic time in our lives. But out of that, we spent 8 months going back and forth to the hospital to see her. She was supposed to have her leg amputated, but we met a wonderful doctor, Dr. Barr, who became a family friend and just a wonderful person, him and his wife and his children. And he actually saved not only her life, but her leg. She was a young woman, 40 years old, with children. And I think that was the start of looking at healthcare and seeing the joy that it can bring, even though out of that, that sorrow, that traumatic experience, we met some wonderful people. And it's really interesting because that's kind of, I think, how I started wanting to be in that field. And I just love helping others. I love seniors. I love helping others. I love doing things like that. But it's really strange because when I did go into nursing, I was working as a student nurse, and I came across, I had a patient, and his daughter was visiting, and I looked at his daughter, and I said, I know you from somewhere. There's something about you that's so familiar. And she says, well, I don't know. I was a nurse. And I said, did you work on the surgical floor at the General? And she said, yes. And I go, is your name Teresa? Because all of a sudden it just flowed into me. And she said, yes. And I go, oh my gosh, you took care of my mother. And she said, and who is your mother? So I mentioned it, and she remembered her right away. And then she goes, are you little Patricia? And I thought, oh my God, I didn't realize, now I'm in my 20s, and going back, not right now, but at that time I was in my 20s, to remember that, I didn't realize how much of an impact that had on me. So that was totally something that was my number one. And then my number two was I love my seniors. I love geriatrics. And I think that stems back from spending so much time with our grandparents and our Nonna and Nonno, and just enjoying their time, their quality time. It led me into long-term care at the beginning of my career. And I'm the most comfortable around seniors. I can be out somewhere and a senior will come up to me and ask me questions, like random questions, or, they'll look at me and they just feel comfortable. And it's because I am so comfortable with them. So I think that's why I started my journey. However, it's a funny story because when I did visit people in the hospital when I was younger, on a few occasions, I would pass out. So
that's not good.
No. So when I decided, nursing, that did cross my mind. But fortunately, that doesn't happen to me, and it never did when I did go into nursing. So I think I made a good choice. And another really funny story is that way back, when I applied, it was a nursing diploma program at Sioux College. I was fortunate that we had such a great program here in the Sioux, and I applied here. However, at that time, it was just random selection. If you met the criteria for the diploma program, then your name kind of randomly got selected, and I was on a wait list. And I thought, oh, okay, great. What am I going to do now? So Mom said, what about hairdressing? So I had actually enrolled in hairdressing school, Michael's School of Hairdressing on Wellington Street. It existed there. He was a friend of Mom's. Yeah. And I was enrolled to go there. And so I could have been a hairdresser, which is probably, would have been great.
So,
however,
I have to ask Patty, because I didn't know this, but I'm having a flashback. Does this have anything to do with when you and your friends would try to do my hair and put makeup on me? Was that anything related to that, or was that just little brother torture?
Maybe a little bit of both.
Okay, sorry for interrupting.
I think I had an interest in hair, and I think as little growing up little girls, and we just like to do that.
So you didn't become a hairdresser though. So
no,
right,
no. So I ended up, I was going to enroll, and then I got a call, and I got into the nursing program. So that's how I ended up going into that field. So it was pretty cool to do that. Yeah. So I think you mentioned, the greatest challenge.
Yeah.
Well, the greatest challenge for me was, I was married at the time when I did get into nursing. And also my first year, when they did call, I was now a few months pregnant. And I went through school raising not only one, but two little people. So Anastasia was born in 91, and Danielle was born in 93, and I graduated in 94. So I was going to school raising little babies, and when I look back at it now, I think, oh my God, how the heck did I do that? But I had so much support, and I loved what I did. And I find too in life, the busier we are, the more we can accomplish. And sometimes if I have more time on my hands, I get less done. So ironically enough, my eldest daughter, Anastasia, is now in nursing, and I tell her it's because through osmosis, she listened to all my lectures. So, yeah, that was one of the greatest challenges in achieving it. It was a little bit stressful, I've got to say, but it was so fulfilling, and I'm so glad that it happened the way it did. So what I would say to others is, no matter what you do, no matter what you choose, it has to be something you love. You have to have a passion for it, because then it doesn't seem like work. Then it just flows and comes so naturally. And we do need a lot of great nurses and healthcare professionals that really care. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the bottom line. You have to go in it because you care. And it just doesn't come to you one day. It's in you. It's
organic, right? Kind of like the plants that you're growing, the organic factor, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, you have to be empathetic and put yourself in people's shoes. And, in part of my career, I've been lucky because I've not only worked as a floor nurse, but I've also worked as a manager, worked in geriatrics, ran a long-term care home, did so many things. And that's the beauty of nursing, is you can have so many opportunities. Right. And what I always, when I did the orientation with new staff coming on, I always tell them this, and I've always practiced my nursing this way, is if that was your loved one, somebody that you love so much, how would you want to treat them? And that's how you treat everybody. Doesn't matter who they are, where they come from, what race, what nationality, doesn't matter. You treat them as the loved person that, you would want them to treat. So if that was your mother, how would you want to treat her? And that's how I treat everybody. And if you do that, you can really be empathetic and really do the best for the person.
I think that's cause for pause there just for a moment and say that's important in, I think, anything that we do, and I can see how in the healthcare system it would even make more sense, right? I mean, we're dealing with people's lives. You're dealing with people's lives, right? One thing you said that caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting you to tell the explosion story and that whole event. And it just made me think, like, you're right. If Dr. Barr if that doctor didn't care and spent hours in surgery, I think my existence would have been challenged because Mom would have had a very different life. So, the whole notion that you experienced of receiving that type of help and seeing somebody care so much, and then, taking us through your experience of helping others. But Patty, I want to transition because when you start talking about helping others, I know that once in a while, when I'm not feeling well, I might call you for some medical advice. A consult before I go get a consult, I guess. The advantage of having a healthcare person in the family. Back in March 2019, something happened to you. And I don't know if you had to go through a sort of self-consulting assessment, but the term that you told me that what happened to you is called is sensorineural hearing loss. And that's something that you've experienced, and it's left you with some different perspectives, some of which I can really relate to, and I'll get to that later. But can you walk us through what happened that day? Tell us where you're at now with this, and how has it changed your life, or how do you do things with it, or in spite of it, I guess. I'll hand that over to you.
Yeah, sure. Excuse me. It's almost been 2 years. It'll be 2 years in March. And I remember the day very clearly. I was working in my office. I was with a patient. And as they were talking, all of a sudden, I thought, okay, I can't hear out of my left ear. What the heck's going on? So now I'm having this internal conversation with myself, and my patient is sitting there, and I'm trying to tune into them, and I'm thinking, what the heck? Is it plugged up? What's going on? So anyhow, my patient leaves, and I get up, and now I have vertigo as well, which the room is spinning, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness. So I got checked out because we have my fellow colleagues in there, and I had my blood pressure checked and so on and so forth, and it was very disturbing, of course. And I went into the emergency. So what happened there was I was given an anti-inflammatory and told, it's probably an inflammation in your ear. They looked in there. They couldn't really see anything. And, as a nurse, sometimes, being in healthcare, when it's yourself or a family member, you sometimes take that hat off for a little bit. And I was in such shock of this happening. And, I asked a few questions, but I should have really pushed it a bit further, and I didn't. So I said, should I not get a CAT scan, or, this is suddenly and they're like, no, this is okay. It can happen, and take this and see what happens, get a hearing test, so on and so forth. So I did go away, but as I went away, my nurse came out in me. And although I hadn't heard of this sudden hearing loss, I know as a professional that anything that happens suddenly is not a good thing. Suddenly you lose your vision. Not good. Suddenly you lose part of the feeling in your arm. Not good. I, suddenly lost my hearing. Not good. So I took it upon myself to, go get a hearing test. I knew what it was going to show, but I just wanted to see how bad it was. And I had severe loss. I got in the next day, and then I started doing more research and realized that I need to go back into Emerge. And the hearing test did show severe, and she said, you need to see an ear, nose, and throat specialist. And you need to see them now, fast. So I went back into Emerge, and again, when I went in, I was a little upset. I was a little bit upset at, the fact that it wasn't treated appropriately. Mm-hmm. And the fact that there's a window of opportunity for medication, which is prednisone, an anti-inflammatory. So I went back, And long story short, when I went into Emerge, there was a long waiting list. I looked up and I thought, oh, God. And then the person that you don't see that often came out of me. And it's the person that kind of, I would say, assertive, not aggressive, but assertive. And so I thought, you know what, I need to get this dealt with. And because I've worked at the hospital, I thought we need to advocate and let this be heard to somebody. So I went and spoke with the manager and let them know what happened and so on and so forth. And the next doctor I saw took it a little bit more serious, I guess. And I did have a CAT scan, and it's so important to rule out other things that can be happening. One of them being like a tumor. And sometimes it's not a cancerous tumor, but it's benign, and it's just where it's appearing. Also, any circulatory issues. Most of the time with this type of hearing loss, it is idiopathic, which means they really don't know why it happened, which is the most frustrating thing on earth. It could be a virus, it could be so many things, but I wasn't sick. I didn't have a cold. I was eating healthy. All these things that I was doing right. So I didn't really get a concrete answer. And I think that's the most frustrating thing. But however, with anything in life, I could have sat back and wallowed in my sorrows and went, oh my God, I can't hear, and now I can't do this and I can't do that, but I didn't. I empowered myself and I went searching, and I found a wonderful group on Facebook, and this is where social media, I mean, if it wasn't around, I don't know what would have happened. So I was on this group on Facebook that is a sudden hearing loss group, and it's amazing, or shocking, I guess, how many people are on this group, all ages, and the same trend. They went to the hospital, they went to the Emerge, they went to their care provider, and people didn't get the appropriate treatment because nobody knows about this. And I thought, what? This is impossible. How could this be? So, part of my goal is to, A, bring awareness out, B, let people know you're not alone. Because if I hadn't have found that group, where would I be? What would I have done? I don't know. And so when I hear others, I automatically jump in and say, whoa, whoa, whoa. And ironically enough, just a couple of weeks ago, we had another colleague of mine in our office that this happened to. Now, how crazy is that, right? So right away, I jumped in and, said, you need to do this, this, and this. And so, I feel good that I can help others. And, it has brought challenges about in life, but the worst part was going into the grocery store the very first time. Because with this comes, your hearing is heightened, ironically. Your good ear makes up for your bad ear.
Yeah.
And I could hear every cart rolling on the concrete, on the flooring, on the tile. I could hear every bell, and it was like overstimulus. I was like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. I can't take this. And it really brought into perspective, the things we take for granted, like hearing and vision and touch. And, and I thought, oh my God, I didn't realize all this, right? And I don't know, it changes you in many ways, and you do have to adapt. And, I have to adapt on where I position myself in an office. I have to adapt on what I do on a phone. I have to adapt in my stethoscope. I actually just got a beautiful stethoscope that the Canadian Hearing Society helped with the funding on it, so that it amplifies, so that I can hear heart and lung sounds. All these little things that, we all take for granted. So it's helped in a lot of ways. And I always think, what's the lesson? What am I learning here? So I always look at that part, and it helps you deal with whatever you're trying to overcome, whatever little stumbling block comes in your way. So yeah, that's my story.
So Patty, there was a part in there where it sounds like you really had to self-advocate for your for either a treatment or to be understood. But you had a bit of an advantage that you leveraged some of your training or your knowledge in terms of health, right? Like you went through a process where you said, hey, this thing doesn't happen, things that happen suddenly like this, I should look at them in a different way. Which suggests to me your experience with it might be different than somebody who doesn't even have that medical training. What do they do? Like, and from the support group, did you find people that said, they didn't have that background and it took them longer, or?
Actually, you know what? I find people are very savvy these days, and especially the younger generation. I know sometimes people go to Google too much and get information that's not accurate.
Right.
But in this particular group, what I found was that people did search out. They looked like, and Facebook was one of the places they went. I just learned about groups in the last couple of years on Facebook. I didn't know that a lot of them existed, but there's a lot of pretty incredible groups there. And a lot of people searched that out and just, they just happened to land in the right place. And you're right. I don't know if you didn't have a background, what would happen. People...
Would it take longer? I'm just thinking it would take longer to get to where maybe you got to. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, from the people that I've met on that group, they've actually were able to get a lot of information there and acted upon it.
So the other part that's interesting for me, and not everybody knows this, and I've only recently started talking about it. I've been, if I can say, I guess half deaf. I haven't had hearing in one of my ears since I think I was about 6 or 7 years old, and mine was not from this type of hearing loss. I think part of my eardrum was removed when I was having some surgery, and I think it had to do with having a cyst or something that was putting pressure on it, etc. So, I don't remember ever hearing from both ears in my life. But the one thing that I can resonate with you on, or a couple of things, is that one is the positioning. I often lean in with my good ear, and people who don't know that I have a hearing impairment of sorts sometimes look at me oddly, like, why is he leaning this way, or why is he positioning his body that way? I've been asked about it. It leads to some interesting conversation or whatever. The other part is hearing certain things. And I know here at home sometimes the family will say, I will say, did you hear that? And they'll say, hear what? And I'll say, that noise, did you hear that? And I think it's coming from outside. And they're like, we don't hear anything. And there's just certain frequencies that my one good ear, for whatever reason, I'm oversensitive to certain types of sound, and you kind of touched on that as well. So just these weird things, and to me weird, right? That I would have other expectations, but I guess you and I have in common now this that we both can't hear. Just we got there in different ways, but what we've experienced afterwards, there's a lot of similarities, right?
Absolutely. And I think you touched on something that I didn't talk about, was along with this, you also get tinnitus or tinnitus. Some people pronounce it differently, which is ringing in your ear, the ear that is you can't hear out of. And it's not only, it can be whooshing, it can be like cymbals. I had like a band playing in there.
Wow.
And it usually happens at night. So that can cause a lot of anxiety and mental health. And so for that, there's acupuncture, there's meditation, there's relaxation, there's what you're eating, your food, making sure you're hydrated. There's just so much information. And again, that's one of the things that they don't know how to treat. And there really isn't a way to treat it. But there are a lot of other things that you can do, alternative medicines, that, you know what, when this all happened to me, I threw anything that I researched at it. I threw B12 at it. I threw flavonoids at it. I threw acupuncture because I thought, you know what, this is my hearing. I'm going to do anything that I possibly can. So,
makes sense.
You know, and it doesn't all work for everybody, but you won't know till you try.
Have you regained some hearing?
I went from severe to moderate, and I tried hearing aids and such, but I decided not to right away because of the tinnitus and because I wanted my brain to adjust.
Right.
It takes your brain has to adjust. And so, you know, I make do. I have some not so good days, but I have better days now than I did before. So,
well, it's an incredible, Patty, it's an incredible story. And I'm hoping that as folks listen to your experience and some of the things we connected on and some of the support options and to self-advocate, if anything of the sort, or that they can relate to of the sort, was to ever happen. I'm just looking here. We're about 30 minutes into the conversation and a couple of 2 or 3 questions in. We haven't really, we've kind of brushed on it a little bit. We haven't really talked about COVID-19, which seems odd, right? I mean, you're a frontline worker and here you are, we're talking. The reality is there is a lot of information out there about, you know, the steps we need to take in terms of limiting transmission, the importance of, you know, washing your hands and you know, I'm sure you could touch on those things, but I want to explore something more personal with you. In terms of experience, and you touched earlier on about, you know, the elderly and care, but taking care of elderly parents during a pandemic. I know with me and our other siblings, we're all in these remote cities. We've been supporting our parents through technology and some other means, but you're right there. You're helping in person. So you're helping them, you're helping us, but you're helping them, right? Can you tell us a bit about that experience in terms of you know, caring for elderly parents during a pandemic? You know, any feedback on the importance? Maybe you touched on mental health, but in this scenario, mental health for the elderly, dealing with the healthcare follow-ups, like you know, if they have to go to a doctor and what that might entail, and, you know, how do we make sure, how do you help make sure that they have the essentials, or any advice for anyone who is taking care of elderly parents and in the context of COVID-19?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it opens up a whole new world there for sure. So with the pandemic, I think with healthcare in general and just life in general, sometimes we're more reactive than proactive. And I think this is another lesson learned from pandemic and taking care of our parents and our seniors and maybe friends that you know that are older. That we should be a little bit more prepared, I guess. And some of the things, you know, again, like with our parents, you know, they did their banking at the bank. They paid their bills at the bank. Just a simple thing, right? So, you know, they would go out for appointments. They would go out for get their groceries. They were still active and independent. So one of the things I learned right away from the start was, okay, how are we going to do all this? And organizing online banking and getting Dad especially. As you know, Dad, he's so consistent with, you know, having his little paper bill and going to the bank and getting it stamped, that I had to talk to them about this and open up a whole new world to them. And we're very fortunate because, you know, Mom, Dad, Uncle, they do go on iPads. They do have some electronic experience. So it was, you know, setting that up. And that was a big piece, you know, all their financial stuff and passwords and so on and so forth. It just, like, wow. And I think, what if this person, or what if our family, we all were out of town? How would they handle that, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's so many that don't have anybody. And I often think of those people and think, wow, how can we help each other out in the community? So that was a big piece. The other piece, you know, you talked about was follow-ups. And unfortunately, they don't have a doctor here any longer. So we have to do a lot of our appointments online. And again, how would somebody do that if they didn't have the experience, if they couldn't do it? So there's a big gap. And, I can help them orchestrate that. We do it online. We get the blood work ordered. And I know, not even like myself, I'm in healthcare, but I know of other friends and, that are not in healthcare that have to do this. So, it's setting people up. And so it brings up, that question, what can we learn from this? Mm-hmm. How can we help those that don't have other people advocating for them, helping them out so that they don't fall through the cracks? Because I think that happens a lot. And the big piece you mentioned is mental health. And as a nurse, I see that with my patients out in the community that are isolated and that feel like they have no connection. We're humans. We need connection. We need people around us. We need those conversations. And so that is a huge, huge problem. And even here in Mom's household, I'm actually here right now. I thought it would be a great place to have the interview. I worried about them. Mom's busy. She does a lot of the cooking and keeps busy that way, but Dad and Uncle are not. And so I was looking, for things for them to do that are meaningful and give them purpose, because we all need that in life.
Right.
And I know for, you and Rolly and Renata, they'll call, and the grandkids, they'll call and FaceTime, and they love that. That's awesome that we could do that. But it's giving them, it's a 24-hour day. You go to sleep, you get up, what do? Right? So crosswords, and we talked about maybe painting, and Dad's like, I don't want to paint. I painted all my life. So I'm looking for things to keep them entertained, especially in the winter months. Summer is great because they can go outside,
mm-hmm.
right? The garden, that's a big piece. Being outside, just being in the sunshine. But it's a huge challenge. It's been a huge challenge, but I think as a not only community, but bigger as a world, we need to really learn more about all these little pieces to help out, because we don't know where this is going. We don't know, is this the new norm? Is this
mm-hmm.
the new way? So we have to prepare ourselves in many ways. So, it's been a learning experience for me too. And being patient, because sometimes, having to deal with those little things that don't make sense to somebody.
Right.
And explaining them, I think that's a big challenge. But
I think you highlighted something very important. And, I asked you the question from the perspective of your experience dealing with elderly parents. And I made a very big assumption there, right? With everybody else, that other elderly folks out there have someone to help. And you pointed out that may not be the case. And that story turns out very differently. And there has to be a reliance on some of the programs and the assistance that's out there in terms of services. But, for those folks to know what they are and accessing them might be a different challenge altogether. So I think it's, folks being able to spread that message, and maybe the pandemic shines a little bit of a light on this in how we are prepared to support our citizens afterwards as well, right?
Absolutely, for sure. I think we do need more, kind of that neighborhood watch program in a sense, right? Where we help our neighbors, we help our community, we help our little pods. I think it's important.
Yeah, I miss those days when we were younger, and that would happen in everything that we did. It seemed to be more prevalent when I was a kid, but maybe we'll get back to that, as a result of some folks helping each other out with the pandemic.
For sure.
There's a couple more questions as we're down the stretch here. There's one more topic that I wanted to touch base with you on. So, listen, growing up together, having typical brother-sister type of moments. I'd have never thought, I guess, how much of a great caregiver you'd become. As a parent, you had a very specific focus with one of your children. and it led to one of my very first visits to Toronto, which was involved coming to see you and your daughter, my niece, at the hospital. She was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at the age of 2, I believe. How did you, and you talked about earlier, hey, you were in nursing school, you already had one kid, you were, fairly freshly married. Along comes a second child, and now you've got this thing going on, which you may or may not have known what it was. So how did you figure out what was going on? What impact did it have on you and the family? How did you explain it to her as she was growing older? What resources did you have available? Any advice for anyone who might be going through a similar experience? Maybe even some who are going through some sort of denial, per se. And then, how's she doing today?
Yeah, well, those are loaded questions. I could spend a whole hour on this, but in light of, our time. So, yeah, Danielle was diagnosed at 2, but what I was noticing with her milestones, baby crawls, baby, reaches out. There were certain signs that I was seeing that I thought, okay, she's not doing the things that Anastasia did, the first daughter. And I was comparing it to that. And I was looking at, reading and going, okay, well, sometimes not everybody's the same, right? Mm-hmm. And she was healthy. She was like a 9-pound, 92-ounce baby. Born from C-section. Her, what they call APGAR scores, which they score a baby, were excellent. She didn't go into NICU. There were no issues with the birth. So there was nothing to tell me that I should be watching for signs. Mm-hmm. But I just knew in my gut that something was not right. And I would go back to the pediatrician and I would say, she's not, and they're saying, oh no, you know what? It's just a slow delay. Sometimes kids are like that. And the more I researched and the more I read about it, and my gut, that intuition, I said, there's something more. We need to look into this more. And it took up to 2 years old because, what they think sometimes when it's a very mild case is that your brain rewires. And again, we have an amazing brain, and it can actually help with different issues. And hers were mostly gross motor, so the walking ability to walk and the muscles. Mm-hmm. She had spastic diplegia, which means she had some tightness in her legs. And so we saw a pediatrician from Toronto through telemedicine here in the Sioux. And that was the first time that somebody actually told me what I already knew in my heart, that she had cerebral palsy. Mm-hmm. Sorry.
It's okay.
And it brings me back to that day because she was 2, I was pregnant, and I went back to the van, and the doctor said, do you have any questions? And I just went, I was like in the shock, I was at a robot, and I just said, no, bye, see you later, kind of thing. And I took her away, and the thing that came into my mind was, it was so crazy, I thought, why am I thinking of that? I put her in her chair, and of course I was crying, and she was just looking at me and going, Mommy, what's wrong? You okay? And I just thought, oh my gosh, she's never going to have a high school dance. Why did I think of that? But that came into my mind. However, Danielle is a high-spirited, motivated, born in May, Taurus, who never, ever gives up. And I've learned so much from her. Mm-hmm. She is, like, as a kid growing up, we never treated her any differently. We always included her in everything that we could. And I remember her saying, I want to go ice skating. And I thought, oh gosh, how are we going to do this? I said, okay. So I put her on ice skates. The other 2 were skating, and we had like a little frame to hold on to. I was behind her, and she did like 1 lap around, and then she looked at me and she's like, okay, I'm done now. And I thought, okay. She wanted to experience it. Uh-huh. And you know what? we didn't stop her from that. Another time, which is the cutest story, she was in grade 3 or 4, and she came home and she's like, I'm going to go into cross-country running. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm thinking Hiawatha, right? Trees and gravel and hills. And I thought, okay. And I go, it's running, right? She goes, that's okay. She goes, I'm going to do fast walking. And I go, okay. So, I mean, this kid doesn't give up. She has this fire within, and in comparison to my other daughter, Anastasia, sometimes, and just being able-bodied people, we give up so easily. And we think, we don't have confidence. She has more confidence than anybody I know. She does not see herself having a disability.
Right.
She is the opposite. And I think it's because of how she was raised, how people treated her in the school system, what she thought of herself, and which is fantastic, right? I'm so proud of her. And as she grows older, she continues to be that confident person that just wants to experience things and be like everybody else. And who doesn't want that, right? We all want to be accepted and loved and part of a community.
Included, right?
Absolutely, totally included. Yeah. And, she just looks for those opportunities. She got her first job. She continues to just blow my mind in so many ways. I wish there was more we could do, and you always have that hope of,
right.
But she is who she is, and she is in our lives for a reason. And I've just learned that, in life we fall and we have to get up. And this kid had fallen so many times in her life that I think, wow, she keeps getting up and continues on, and it doesn't stop her and slow her down. So she's an inspiration to me.
I think to all of us, right? And listen, you touched on something here that over the last few questions when we talk about challenges and disabilities, and you said she doesn't see herself as having a disability. And I meant to ask you, do you see yourself as having a disability with the hearing? And
no.
Right. And hers is obviously more noticeable, right, than yours or mine. Yeah. Right? So she has to deal with that perception or how people interpret when they see something versus not see something, right?
Yeah.
And she's had to battle that and overcome that and have people understand it instead of be scared of it, right?
That's right. Yeah. She, as she got older and, wanted to try all these different things, which was fantastic. She actually did a presentation when she was, I think, in grade 3 or 4 on cerebral palsy. And she used to wear little braces, and she brought them in, kind of that show and tell.
Yep.
And letting people know, what was happening, what was going on, and what, her challenges were, but at the same time, teaching others, right, about it. And so I think that's so important. It's an extension of you. And it's funny because when kids draw pictures, you see them drawing, stick people. Yep. She would include her she wouldn't have her cane there when she had a little quad cane. Uh-huh. And then as she got a little bit older, it was included. It was a part of her. Huh. And it was so neat to see that transition and what she was thinking, right? And she had questions, but she was accepting of it. She didn't say, I can't do that, or I can't do that because I can't walk, or I can't do that because I can't be fast enough, or she'd always say she'd find a way. Find a way. Whether
right, it became integrated. It became integrated into her life and your life and all of our lives, right? As we kind of found our way through it, right?
Yeah, I do have to say that being a child and having a disability, and there are a lot more resources. Unfortunately, especially with cerebral palsy, as an adult, there are less and less resources, which is, and it could be being in a northern community. I think in Toronto area, there's a lot more. There's, I think there's Varsity Village, where there's just a lot more to do. Where here, we're a little bit more behind. And so that's kind of something that, you know, we hope to improve in so many ways, because even just finding a doctor that knows a little bit more about that for adults is a bit of a challenge. So,
and we're also in a different time. Like when you were going through this and some of the other things, the access to information was a lot different. I mean, it's at your fingertips now. Getting it, understanding it, talking to people that aren't just up in Northern Ontario. They could be anywhere in the world. It just seems more accessible. And so hopefully that's translated to some greater learning opportunities and access to information sooner that helps some other folks out, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, Patty, man, we've covered some really, really good, deep topics here, and had some very personal moments as well that we shared with folks today. But I want to, having covered all this ground, I want to switch gears a little bit, have some fun with some rapid fire type of questions. And the way that I like to end this off is I'll say the topic and you tell me the first thing that comes to mind. Just a little bit of fun as we bring this to some conclusion. Are you okay with that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right. So, okay, so here's the first one. Red Rock.
Summer.
So Red Rock is summer. That Red Rock is our parents' camp, right? Or I guess down in Southern Ontario we say cottage. Peking Palace.
Guido.
Why is that, Patty?
Because we used to go there.
For some French fries, right? Okay, Cartwheel.
Black Eye.
I was kind of hoping you'd say I'm sorry. It's been it's been a few years since you gave me that Cartwheel black eye when I was very small. Family.
Love.
The Spirit.
Joy.
It's interesting. You know what I thought? Maybe I'm forgetting. Didn't you have a car called the Spirit?
I did.
Ah, okay. That's what I had thought at first, but interesting.
It was the AMC Spirit.
Right.
That blue car. It was
Yeah.
cute. Hatchback. It was Renata's old car.
That's right. Okay, last one. Tomatoes.
Family.
All the tomato sauce, right, Patty?
Yeah. Good
All
time.
right. Patty, listen, thanks for sharing your stories with me and with whoever chooses to listen. It's always a privilege to have folks listen, and hopefully they get something out of the insights that you've provided today. Thank you for doing what you do as a frontline worker. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with before we go?
Absolutely. I have this beautiful quote that you've probably heard of, but it just fits in nicely with what we're talking about. And it's Maya Angelou. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And this is so true in anything you're doing in life. So thank you very much. I truly enjoyed this, and wish you the best.
Thanks so much, Patty. Keep things real and keep it safe, eh?
All right, you too.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Welcome to the story portion of my podcast for January 2021. Goodbye 2020, right? With the event of the new year and several measures in place, it looks like the NHL has now started up again in a reduced season. I think there's a total of 56 games happening. There's a North Division with all the Canadian teams, and they've redrawn the map and put in a bunch of protocols to try and keep the players safe and provide us with some entertainment. So I thought with that in mind that I would share with you a story this month about the day, this is hard to believe, maybe, the day that I was Jean Beliveau'sBody Guard. How is that possible? This goes back several years now. I was going to school in Windsor, attending the University of Windsor, and I had a little part-time job at this little shop called Smith Books, and I think it was the Devonshire Mall, if I remember correctly. Maybe, I can't remember. It was the mall, one of their big malls, anyways, in Windsor. And the manager of the store says to me one day, "Hey, can you work on?" I can't remember the exact day it was. "Can you work on Thursday? We've got a book signing happening." And I said, "Well, I don't know. I had some classes on Thursday, and things were getting pretty busy at school, and I said, I don't know if I could take on that extra shift." She goes, "I really could use somebody. It's some hockey player, and we need somebody to keep the audience further back. He's going to come for a book signing." I said, "Well, who's the hockey player?" She goes, his name is Jean." I'm thinking, Jean? I don't know any Jeans. I said, "Jean who?" She says, "Jean Believeu." And then we both looked at each other, and I was still trying to process, because in my mind I'd already realized who the hockey player was, but she was looking at me like, are you okay?" And I said, Jean Beliveau is coming here?" She says, "Oh, is that how you say his name?" Yes. But what day was this? I said. She says, "Thursday, right?" I said, "Okay." I said, I'll take the shift." And she says, "Well, I haven't told you what time." I said, "It's okay. It doesn't matter. It's okay. Just tell me when he's going to get here, when I need to be here." So, all right. So she sets that up, and I am on cloud 9. I'm thinking to myself, I have to stand in a spot where I'm going to make sure people don't get too close to Jean Beliveau. Now, you gotta understand, like, I never saw him play live, of course, but, my brother had told me so many stories about the Montreal Canadiens and Jean Beliveau, and he was one of our favorites. And, saw enough videos and highlights on him in the past. So I go home that night, and I was living with my brother. He was kind enough to help me out during university days. And I was living with my brother, and I said, "You're not going to believe this." I said, this week I'm gonna be Jean Beliveau'sBody bodyguard for a day, like, make sure people don't get too close. He's like, "No way, this is amazing." So anyways, I think it might have been the next day or so, my brother comes home, and he has a gift for me. I said, "Well, what's this?" He went and got me a Jean Beliveau rookie card. And I said, "Oh, this is too cool, right? This is really neat." I said, I wonder if he's going to sign it. So anyways, well, fast forward, the day comes, I go to the store, I'm there early, I've got a tie on, nice white shirt and everything. And we're in the back, and the manager calls me over, and she says, "Okay, he's here. Come meet him so he knows who you are," and vice versa. And so I go to the back, and he's standing there, and he such a tall person. And I extend my hand out, and I say, "Mr. Beliveau," and he's shaking my hand, right? He reaches for I reach for his hand, he reaches for my hand. I say, "Mr. Beliveau, this is such an honor. I've watched all your highlights, and my brother's told me all about you, and this, and we're shaking hands at the same time, and this is continuing, and this is such an honor that I could be here, and that you're allowing me to do this, and I think it's so fantastic, and it's great," and I'm still shaking his hand. And at this point, my manager Edna she starts kicking me in the shin because she's kind of standing beside me. And I'm looking at her like, what? She's like, let go of his hand. I'm like, oh, right. Now, when I tell you his hand wrapped around my hand completely, and I think touched the back of his own hand again. It was such a big mitt, as they say, or a big paw, as they say in hockey sometimes. I'm pretty sure, like, when he was looking at me, he was thinking, who's going to save me from this guy? Never mind him saving me from the people who are going to come in line with us. So, anyways, it was a moment that I won't forget, meeting him that way. So we go out and do this. He sets up, he's got the table in the front of the store, and the line had already been forming, and we do that for a few hours, and it was great. Went off without a hitch. Folks were so happy. They wanted to take their picture, and we made sure that all of that worked out really well. I'm still pretty sure the condition and the size of him, that if anything had gone wrong, he'd probably protect me before I would have protected him. But I like to think that, I provided some shield for him that day. What really struck me, though, well, the thing I remember, one of the things I remember the most, or I loved the most about it, was when the official book signing was over at the front. He went to the back of the store, and listen, it's a bookstore. The stock back there, the shelves are really tight. There's not a lot of space. We don't have the best tables and chairs. They're just your standard tables and chairs. And he must have had about, I think it was like 300 books of people who just couldn't make it that day, who wanted their book signed. And he sat at this table and this little wooden chair, and he opened every single book, and he signed every single book. And if there was a note of hey, make it out to so-and-so, he signed it. And he did that with all of the books that were in the back that day, it's phenomenal. It really spoke to the character and to the generation of the hockey player that he was. So one of the last things I asked him before I left, after my duties were done for the day, is I said, Mr. Beliveau, would you please sign my book, and would you mind autographing this card? And he took the card, and he put it on the desk, and he looked at it for maybe 20, 30 seconds. And I thought to myself, I remember him looking at the card thinking, oh, maybe he's not going to sign it. Maybe, I guess when a hockey player signs something, will it get too much value, and he doesn't do that sort of thing. But the more I looked at him and the more he was looking at the card, it was like a moment of reflection almost. Anyways, he ends up, turning the card sideways, and he autographs the card, and I have it to this day. It's on my shelf. I also had the book was autographed, and I had my picture taken with him. So it was a total honor. We had a lot of fun, and I just remember, the character, that he had that day, and how he showed that he cared for people who couldn't even make it that day. So great personality, great story. On the heels of the NHL returning, I hope that they have a safe return, and that we can all have some entertainment with that in this pandemic time period, and that hopefully the game produces more players and people with the same great character of Jean Beliveau. Thanks for listening, and take care.